once you get there, once you do break the code, once you do figure out what that formula is that resonates with people, connects with people, and you find out the value that they're looking for and you deliver that, then not that you don't have to evolve with the time, but now you have created what I call consequential knowledge. You have knowledge that is consequential and you uniquely own that. Somebody can't come and do that without you. And that makes you truly in business for yourself.
Okay, love that you brought this up because I have a quick story for you. Remember how I mentioned this act of unbossing and believing that you could do it on your own? Well, I was about 3 years into my business and I thought I had unbossed myself. I thought I was a good boss and leading the way. And then I was presented from a peer of mine to become a partner in my business. So I had almost hit $1 million year. And this guy who was younger than me, who was really strategic and smart, he said, Amy, I've got an idea. Why don't you make me a 50-50 partner and we can explode this business you've created? And I was friends with him for a while. And Dr. Phil, I would love to tell you that it took me weeks to make a decision. I'd love to tell you I consulted lawyers. I talked to my husband. We went over it. I'd like to tell you all that happened. It took one night of sleep. And I said yes to this guy. Yes, you can have 50% of my business because yet again, I was scared that I couldn't make it on my own. And I don't want to go too deep into this because you could give me some therapy like that. Believe me, I've had a lot, but I've always thought that I needed a man. I thought that I needed a man to help me make decisions. And, it started with my dad and then all these male bosses. And so here's this guy saying, I see potential in you, Amy. You could be huge, but let me help you. And I went right back into my old habits of thinking I can't do it alone. And so I said yes. And for years, we made millions together. This business really took off until about 3 or 4 years in. And I looked in the mirror and thought, I don't even know who I am. I have let this guy become my boss. And it was no fault to him. I did this, but I went right back into, are you proud of me? Am I doing a good job? And when the business wasn't working, what do we do? What should we do? Help me, give me advice. Like I lost myself again. And I had already become an entrepreneur with almost $1 million business. And so when I realized, wait a second, I've literally went back into employee mode. I had to snap myself out of it really quickly. So the story I didn't want to tell in the book that I did tell is what it took to get me out of that situation. I literally almost lost my entire business because we almost had to dissolve it. Now, the reason I bring this up is because what you said, there was a moment that I was so weak and I almost gave all of it up. And then I remembered, wait a second, I know how to make money online. I've done this. So you can burn this down and I am going to build it back up because I know what I'm doing now. What did you call it? You had a name for it.
Consequential knowledge.
I had consequential knowledge. And that was the first time I think I've ever felt incredibly confident in my abilities because I had done it. And if you take this away from me, I will do it again. So fast forward, and I talk about in the book how I got out of it. And from the time I got out of it till a year later, I went from $5 million in my business to $16.5 million in a year. And I believe it's because it was the first time that I stepped into, wait a second, no one's coming to save me. I am going to figure this out. And I have officially started to believe in myself. That's how powerful it can be. And that's why I had to write the book. I want more women to step into that. I'm not unique. I'm very insecure in many, many ways. But when I realized, wait a second, I got this, burn it down, I'll build it back better, is when I stepped into it.
Yeah. And at that point, you've just made a decision. Hey, I do know something that is not common knowledge. And this is what I mean by consequential knowledge. And I tell people that if you want to succeed in this life, you need to develop consequential knowledge. If you can be replaced with what you're doing to make money in 2 hours, if you work at McDonald's, which is a legitimate job, I'm not putting that down. I'm just saying, if you can be replaced in 2 hours, then you don't have consequential knowledge. But if you are a computer repair tech, if you are a brain surgeon, if you have a unique business and talent for creating content and marketing on the internet, whatever it might be, if that's something that if you leave, they can't replace you in a short period of time, you have consequential knowledge. What you know is consequential to your life and their business, then all of a sudden you're not working for minimum wage anymore. Now you're bringing something to the table that people need and they're willing to pay for that.
Yes.
When you said, hey, burn it down, I can build it back because I've got that information, that's when you become independent.
Absolutely. And that's when life begins to change. So when you think about let's say you're in a 9 to 5 job and you're listening right now and you look around and you think this cannot be it. There's got to be something better for me. I cannot stay here much longer. The first thought is I'm going to quit and get another 9 to 5 job. But when you build that kind of knowledge that you talk about, and this is something you can do over time, I have no doubt in my mind, you never turn back. Like, can you imagine, Dr. Phil, ever turning back and working for somebody else? Can you even imagine at this point?
It just wouldn't work. I mean,
it wouldn't work. Exactly. Now, you're different than me, and you probably always had that gene of like, I'm going to be my own boss and I'm going to lead. Like, well, I have a quick question for you. Have you ever had a boss?
The last job I had was for Hallmark cards in my junior year of high school.
I had a feeling. Okay, so you're definitely a rarity where you probably never were meant to have a boss. But for those listening, I was absolutely meant to have a boss and I was really good at it. But I didn't realize when I didn't have a boss anymore, you will never, ever go back. There's nothing in you. When you get a taste of freedom of being your own boss, you will never, ever let anybody walk all over you, decide when you can take a vacation, when you can get a raise. All of that becomes like, no, that's not part of my story. So I just am here to prove that it is absolutely possible to move from employee to boss over time. It's just one decision at a time.
And I want to say at the same time, not all bosses are evil.
I totally agree. Yes.
Whether they're male or female, young or old, whatever, not all bosses are evil. Entrepreneurship is not for everyone. I spend a lot of time working in the legal profession. There are lawyers that are cut out to be contingency fee plaintiff lawyers, where they might work on a case for 3 years and not make a dime and then make $38 million. And then there are lawyers that work on the defense side where they get paid an hourly fee. They know what it's going to be. They'll never make the $38 million, but they have the security of knowing they're going to get paid every month. One side is not for everybody, and the other side is not for everybody. Different personalities fit different things. But if you hear that call of wanting to be in business for yourself, wanting to chart your own course, once you do it, you burn the ships in the harbor. There is no going back.
I love that you said that. And I love that you said that not all bosses are bad. Actually, I had great bosses. I didn't hate my job. That's something I want to touch on really quickly. Some people are listening and they're like, actually, I have a good boss. I have a good company that I work with. I feel like I had golden handcuffs. I had a good boss. I got paid well. I got to travel. I got to work with Tony Robbins. Like, how cool is that? All of that on paper was great, but I wanted something more. And so I agree that entrepreneurship is not for everybody. I have a sister who's a second grade teacher that never in her wildest dreams does she want my life. She thinks my life is crazy compared to her life. And so she is never going to do this. However, when I looked around personally and realized this is not what I want, it didn't mean I had to hate the life I had. It's just that I had bigger aspirations for me. So some people listening, you don't have to be miserable to go after bigger dreams. You just have to get clear on what you want. And I think that does kind of change things a little bit for some.
Yeah, I think it's so important that people define what success looks like and feels like for them, because the worst thing in the world I think you could do is succeed at the wrong thing. Can you imagine spending your whole life and becoming the best accountant ever to account? And then you get at the end and say, my God, I have become the supreme accountant on the planet, and I wanted to be a guitar player.
Oh,
I mean,
exactly.
How miserable would that be? And then for some people, like my mother, rest her soul, she asked me one time, she said, how many people do you have working for you? And I said, I don't know, 300, 400, I don't know. She said, well, what is your payroll? I said, 40
Couple
million a
million?
year or something. She said, oh my God, I'm just going to take to the bed. She would rather do anything than be in that situation.
Yes. And that is okay.
She would have been miserable.
Yes, it's true. So getting clear about what you want, I think that's like the biggest lesson. It's a life lesson. I don't know if we all are really clear about what do you want. I have a good friend. Her name's Mel Robbins, and she's a motivational speaker, coach. And she once had me do an exercise where every single day I had to write down 5 things that I wanted. And the goal was to kind of change it up as you go, but every day, 5 things. I struggled in the beginning to come up with what I actually wanted. I was never even asking myself. So if someone walks away from this episode and the only thing they do is start to get clear on what you really want, I feel like we've won here because it's a very important question to ask yourself.
You start narrowing it down, and across time, you come to a laser targeted destination. Early on, what guided me was I went through and got a bachelor's, master's, PhD, postdoctoral fellowship, all this stuff. And the one thing that I always held on to was I'll never go work for a corporation with this education. But beyond that, my commitment was I want to market my education in non-traditional ways. So if the traditional thing to do was to hang out a shingle and be in private practice or whatever, I knew that's not what I want to do. So I was narrowing things down to say, whatever I do, I want to be sure that I'm not a face in the crowd. I want to market my education in non-traditional ways. And so from the very first day out of school, I started doing non-traditional applications of my education in like management training, things like that, in addition to some of the other things. And it opened up all of these different avenues. It made a huge, huge difference in where I wound up today. And maybe that's what people do. They may not know, I want to go start a surfing business or a content business. Maybe it's just, here's what I don't want to do. And I want to do something that's in this category, and I'll figure that out as I go along.
I love that 100%. That's why I say action creates clarity. What I do today, I help people build businesses online. That was not my end all be all. That's not why I left my last 9-to-5 job. I just wanted something different, like you said. But also, what I also love is you didn't have all the answers. You know, you wanted a non-traditional way to apply your knowledge, but you didn't know what that would lead to. I mean, your life has been incredible, and some of that probably blew your mind at the time that it was happening. That's why we have to just start somewhere. And I love that you said, maybe start with what you don't want to get a little bit more clarity there. But
Yeah.
you just need a starter idea, something in my book that you could read in detail. It's called The Sweet Spot, where I take you through some questions to ask just to come up with that initial idea for you to get going. And one of the questions I ask is, what lights you up? It doesn't need to be your life's purpose, your mission. I feel like that's a very big question. But what do you enjoy doing? Because you also don't want to create a business, like you said earlier, where now you're the best attorney there is out there and all you've ever wanted was to be a guitarist. And so you got to create something that lights you up.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And then I think if you can surround yourself with people that share that passion, that want you to succeed, and that succeed along with you, because I've never seen a single person that really succeeded long term, whether it was in medicine, music, theater, landscaping, whatever it was, that was a lone ranger. They're always surrounded by people that want them to succeed and want to succeed with them.
Absolutely.
Everybody gets a payoff. It can't be just you. Everybody else has to get emotionally fed, get something out of it as they go along too. And then everybody's pushing the rock up the hill together.
I love that. Yeah, you don't want to do this alone. And entrepreneurship, especially the kind that I teach, building businesses online, can be very, very lonely. You got to find your people early on. That's why in the beginning, I said, if you're still in a 9-to-5 job and you have a plan to start your own thing, you got to tell a few people to keep you accountable. But once you get out there, surround yourself with people that are doing bigger things than you that will support you along the way, because you do not need to do this on your own.